Even before the end of World War II, captured and German jet fighters were at the disposal of the Soviet Air Force Research Institute, Me-262, and after the end of the war, there were also secret documents and flight test results. From these documents, it became known what dangerous phenomena were encountered not only by the test pilots of the company, Schmitt, but also combat pilots in combat regiments. Danger awaited at high speeds when the pilots tried to approach the speed of sound. At first glance, it may seem that the plane, it has all the attributes of a supersonic modern aircraft. Great streamlined shape, swept wing, jet engines. It seems like all the attributes are there. However, something went wrong. You and I know that the first planes that reached the speed of sound and even exceeded it, such as the American the Bell X-1 or the Soviet La-176, did this by accelerating in a descent, because at that stage of the technical development of the jet engine, there simply was not enough thrust to do this in level flight. So what prevented the German test pilots from doing the same on the Me-262? Accelerate to the speed of sound and become the first conquerors of the sound barrier. We will learn about this from the report of a German test pilot named Hoffman. These are exactly the same secret documents that were at the disposal of the NE and the Air Force. And that's what Hoffman writes in them. As a test pilot of the company Messerschmitt, in the last months of the war, I had to test the Me-262 aircraft in flights with large numbers of M. Number Mach, if anyone doesn't know, is an attitude the current speed of the aircraft to the speed of sound, under the given conditions on this height. 1 m is the speed of sound. At that time, these tests were given very important in view of the following considerations. First, for further reading, the development needed to be collected, perhaps, more complete material on flights with by large Mach numbers. Second, in the testing process of the Mi-262 aircraft, there were some very unusual accidents cases, for which it was necessary to figure out. These disasters have happened as follows. The Me-262 aircraft, by achievements in level flight, high speed spontaneously went into a dive, take out of which the pilot's plane is no longer it worked. To establish the reasons for these disasters by investigation, it was practically impossible, because the pilots did not stay alive, but the planes crashed completely. One person died as a result of these disasters. The company's test pilot, Mr. Schmitt, and a number of military pilots. Notable in all these disasters, it was that none of the victims, the pilots, did not report the accident, messages on the radio, despite the fact that there was plenty of time for that. Enough, since the transitions in diving usually took place at altitude 8,000 meters. Before falling to the ground, there were no signs of destruction, the plane or its fire. Assumed the following are the causes of these disasters. First, the pilots fell ill with altitude sickness, the disease. Second, at high speeds on aerodynamic surfaces, compaction spikes appeared on the plane, which, in turn, created some sound waves they influenced the pilot so that he could not fly the plane. And third, in the system stabilizer electrical controls, there was a short circuit to the ground. Also, a breakdown was considered as the cause, the stabilizer permutation worm. And Hoffman's fifth point suggested some aerodynamic features of the aircraft who did not allow the pilot to withdraw aircraft from a dive on the numbers of M. Further, Hoffman writes the following. During the tests, it turned out that when a certain Mach number is reached, the problems really arose a lot. Strong noises. Special devices installed in the cabin noted the occurrence of audible but not definable sound effects. Waves. The study of these waves was carried out doctors, but due to the end of the war, have not been completed. Both of the company's test pilots, who they flew before me according to the same program, they felt, like me, exceptionally strong physical fatigue. After the event test flight at high altitude at high speeds, the pilot felt completely broken. Insomnia, increased excitability, feeling of fear, balance disorder, and symptoms they were so strong that they often deprived the pilot's ability to continue trials. Neither of us felt particularly high voltage even when enough prolonged flight at a speed of approximately 850 kilometers per hour. That is, the pilots, they lost the ability of normal aircraft control is by no means as a result of overvoltage, and as a result of some other reasons. Technical problems were eliminated by the fact that the electrical system was subsequently made to wire. It's completely guaranteed a ground fault. However, despite this, accidents continued. The tests were carried out according to the methodology. They gained altitude up to 10,000 meters. They accelerated the plane to its maximum flight speeds at maximum thrust the engine. Then the plane is slow and it was smoothly moving downwards. Depending on the angle of inclination of the trajectory, we reached a measured altitude of 7,000 meters, different speed readings. Quite suddenly, a strong rumble, similar to the drum beat that it had an intimidating effect on the pilot, especially someone experiencing this for the first time. The reason for this rumble: perhaps we should look for formation of small local jump seals, which, however, they do not affect the flight stability. That is, it's like it was a kind of warning. At first, we assumed that this was to blame a large airplane cabin lamp. However, the same noise occurred on the plane, equipped with a small and low, in quotation marks, a racing cockpit light. This, the only copy of the lantern, was very perfectly shaped and so small that the pilot could only fit in the cockpit in the full sense of the expression by pulling in head on shoulders. The view from the cockpit was, naturally, it is limited. With further acceleration, at the flight speed is approximately 950 kilometers per hour, that's 0.85 Mach, the plane suddenly jerked over to the nose, increased by about 15 degrees. That is, it increased the angle of descent and rushed to the ground. We called this phenomenon the Maha stroke. At the same time, press the control knob, the elevator began to operate like this large reverse loads, which plane alignment, even with both hands, it was becoming impossible. The pilot I had to pull with all my strength with one hand, take the handle on yourself, and with the other hand carefully and bring the stabilizer in a measured manner, the position corresponding to the alignment of the plane. For those who don't know, the Me-262 was a controlled variable destabilizer. If everything is done that's right, then plane alignment, it ended at an altitude of about 4,000 meters, at the speed is approximately 900 kilometers per hour. And this is when there is a pre-trimmed steering wheel, we set the heights for cabjinging, and still the magnitude of the effort increased, to the limit of physical capabilities. The disasters mentioned above, they could have happened in the following way. Quite it is likely that the pilots, for the first time having met with such an unusual a phenomenon, after a short attempts to change the aircraft's alignment, it was believed that the mechanism of permutation, the stabilizer, is not correct. Quite it is likely that the victims of the accident, pilots who have lost confidence in the serviceability of the mechanism, started in the last phase of the dive, was unsuccessful pull the control knob with both hands to myself. Accordingly, both hands were busy, and they just couldn't click on the radio button. Based on these reasons, I personally installed on my airplane toggle switch radio installations, from reception to transmission. During the entire dive, this toggle switch, it was in the transmission position, so I had the opportunity to lead transmission during the entire dive. From safety conditions for aircraft pilots, Germany adopted the following manual. At flight speeds up to 800 kilometers per hour, balancing the plane as usual, that is, to achieve 0 points on the handle effort. Over 800 must be rearranged stabilizer so that there is a moment on cabriolet. Accelerate over 900 kilometers per hour, forbidden. When flying with too much, the aircraft always uses large Mach numbers. Spontaneously begin to commit fluctuations relative to the longitudinal axis. The roll angles are plus or minus 10 degrees, and the fluctuations are about 2 seconds. At the same time, there was no load on the ailerons, and they were completely ineffective. The largest, the true speed I was reaching, it was 980 kilometers per hour. That's 0.875 Mach. But after the blow, the Maha could follow the blow is Mach 1b. With this term we called sudden stall of the aircraft on the wing. At the same time, as a rule, during half a second, the plane completely crashed. The reason for this could be the following. The first is the deviation of the ailerons. Second, getting the plane out of the plane too fast diving. The third is the presence of even slight sliding angle. And the fourth is the flight of an airplane through layer C temperature inversion. After the impact Mach 1, B, I am always perfect automatically deflected the ailerons completely for withdrawal. In these cases, the hinge the moment of the ailerons was almost equal 0, and for a long time they were ineffective. Only after the time during which the aircraft he was in the full position, stalling, they slowly gained efficiency and renewed efforts on the handle management. Plane alignment in such conditions, it was possible to finish, sometimes only at an altitude of about 1,500 meters. The pilot then describes the events which were conducted in order to eliminate these dangerous phenomena and still achieve high flight speeds. Because Schwalbe had one significant disadvantage. On the enemy's plane, going 1,000 meters lower, it was impossible to speculate, as usual, but it was necessary to get closer, gradually decreasing. We tried to thicken the steering profile surfaces, installed aerodynamic ridges, but significantly increase the dive speed was never achieved. So, friends, you and I see that the flight, there was a high-speed Schwalbe, it's more like a rodeo. But also in the end it is worth adding that with similar problems encountered during testing, even piston-powered fighters. For example, during the testing of the Soviet fighter aircraft I-5 at high altitudes, when reaching the numbers M07 and greater, when output from diving and the presence of aircraft overload, about the same way. That Schwalbe threw on the wing. There is information that with similar problems were encountered when the test of the American Thunderbolt. By the results of such tests, and that maximum was set the speed that was allowed to develop in a dive by a combat pilot. The sound barrier, as a complex of technical problems that were waiting to be solved, in those days were for humanity a mysterious but desirable frontier. Well, and that's all for now. If you liked it, don't forget to like it.